The Cursed Swan, Part 4, The Price of Freedom. The Sorceress Morwenna stood before them, her dark cloak rippling in the wind. She was younger than Elena expected. Not an old crone, not a monstrous figure, but a woman of quiet, terrible power. Her sharp eyes flickered between them, a slow smile curving her lips. "Well," she murmured, "the lost prince and the girl who follows him." Aldric's jaw tightened. "You know why we've come," he said. Morwenna tilted her head. "Do I?" Elena stepped forward. "Break the curse." The sorceress sighed, almost amused. "You say that as if it's a simple thing." Her emerald gaze locked onto Aldric. "You want to be free?" she asked. Aldric exhaled. "Yes." Morwenna smiled. "Then let's see if you are willing to pay the price." Morwenna lifted her hand. The air shimmered, and in an instant, they were no longer standing before the ruined tower. The three of them were surrounded by shifting darkness, a vast space of swirling shadows and echoing whispers. Elena stiffened. "What is this place?" Morwenna didn't look at her. She was watching Aldric. "This is the place where fate is rewritten," she said smoothly. Then she turned to Elena. "And you, my dear, have no part in it." Elena barely had time to react before the shadows surged forward, wrapping around her, pulling her away from Aldric. She fought, but it was useless. The last thing she saw was Aldric's silver eyes widening. "Elena!" Then, darkness. Aldric stood in the center of the endless void. He could still hear Elena's voice fading into the shadows. His hands curled into fists. "If you've harmed her," Morwenna laughed softly. "She is safe, but she is not important to this." Aldric's heart pounded. "Bring her back." Morwenna studied him. And then she whispered, "You love her." Aldric froze. He had not spoken it. He had barely let himself think it. But Morwenna could see it. And she smiled like she had already won. Love always makes things complicated. Aldric forced himself to stay steady. "What do you want?" Morwenna's gaze sharpened. "I will break the curse," she said. "I will give you back your life." Aldric held his breath. Then she lifted a hand, and the next words she spoke chilled him to the bone. "But in exchange, you must forget her." Aldric's breath caught. Morwenna's voice was smooth, patient. "Elena will return to her world, untouched, unharmed. You will walk free. No more feathers, no more lake, no more lonely nights beneath the moon." She tilted her head. "You will simply never have met her." Aldric's heart pounded. He should have expected this. Curses always had a price, and this was worse than death. To live, but without her. To be free, but to never know the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her hand in his. To never remember the way she had looked at him. Not with pity, not with fear, but with belief. She had believed in him. And now, Morwenna wanted him to erase it. Aldric lifted his gaze, and for the first time in years, he felt something stronger than sorrow. Fury. His voice was low, steady. "No." Morwenna's smile faltered. "What?" Aldric stepped forward. "I would rather remain cursed than forget her." The shadows shook. For the first time, Morwenna's expression changed. Not amusement, not cruelty, but something almost like regret. "You truly love her," she whispered. Aldric did not hesitate. "Yes." Morwenna exhaled slowly. Then the world shattered. Elena gasped awake. She was back at the tower ruins, the morning sun rising over the cliffs. She turned sharply, and there he was. Aldric. He was on his knees, trembling, as if the very air had been knocked from his lungs. She rushed to his side. "Aldric!" He looked up, and for the first time, his silver eyes were filled with sunlight. Elena's breath caught. His skin was warm, not cold, not fading. And she turned to the lake. The water was still. No ripples, no glimmer of silver feathers. Her chest tightened. "The curse," she whispered. "It's broken." Aldric inhaled, as if he had just realized it himself. The wait, the endless years of waiting, were gone. He reached for her, but then hesitated. Elena didn't. She threw her arms around him, holding him like she never would again. Aldric let out a breathless, shaking laugh. He was free. And he still knew her. He had won. They had won. And for the first time, the morning came without taking him away. Days passed. The lake remained still, no longer a prison. Aldric was no longer a man of the night. He walked under the sun, beneath the trees, beside Elena. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted one evening. Elena smiled. "That's the best part." Aldric watched her, something soft and unspoken in his gaze. "I spent years waiting for freedom," he murmured. His fingers brushed against hers, slow and deliberate. "I never thought it would look like this." Elena's heart pounded. Like this. Like them. She laced her fingers through his, and the wind carried her whispered words over the water. "Then let's write a new story." The end.